Hello, my name's Bethan. I'm an educator at the National Gallery. As you can see today, we're not in the National Gallery, but instead I'm at home. In today's video, we're going to be exploring some self-portraits from the National Gallery's collection and using these as inspiration to create some of our own experimental self-portraits. A wonderful piece we have in the collection is this self-portrait by the Dutch artist Rembrandt. In his lifetime, he created around 80 self-portraits. Here we see him in the last years of his life at the age of 63. What I love about this painting is the honesty and detail he goes into when exploring the face. The mottled skin on the forehead, the dark lines and circles around his eyes. What we see in this painting is a man who is no longer concerned with the way he portrays himself, but what we see instead is true, honest self-examination. In a self-portrait by the French artist Cezanne, we see a similar contemplation. The early intensity of self-portraits has given way to a more distant and reflective presence. The wallpaper behind his head acts as a frame, and this halo-like effect is added to by the way that the light is hitting one side of his head. Something to look at more closely is the way the two artists use brushwork to investigate their features. Cezanne works in a very meticulous way, laying down parallel lines to build up the skin tone, whereas Rembrandt works with thick layers of paint alongside light flecks to contrast against the loosely painted background. These two uses of brushwork can be described as a form of mark making. Mark making is an art term used to describe the way that lines, marks and textures are used to build up an artwork. What I love about mark making is that it can be used in a loose and gestural way or a neat and controlled way. But I often think it's this process that brings an artwork to life. Before we start to create some of our own self-portraits, we're going to construct some of our own drawing tools. To take inspiration from the artist's self-portraits and the expressive lines and marks they use, I want us to build a drawing tool that will allow us to free up and experiment in our drawing process. Depending on what you have around the house, you can design a tool to be dipped into ink or paint, or even just design a tool to hold a pen or pencil in a different way. Today I'm going to be using ink as well as some household objects such as cardboard, string and sponge, as well as some objects I found outside. Once you've constructed your tools, it's time to test them out. On a sheet of paper, experiment with different lines, textures and shapes you can create. Experiment with how you hold your drawing tool, or even try combining a few together and see the effect it has. When you feel confident using your drawing tools, it's now time to move on and create some quick portraits. I'd recommend working in a mirror rather than using a photograph, as this will allow you to experiment with lighting and positioning techniques. It can often be quite daunting when faced with a blank sheet of paper, so feel free to use different scales or even add on some marks or textures before you start to work, and you can build your portrait over the top of these. When looking at your face, notice light and dark as well as any lines or textures. I'd also recommend starting not from a central point of your face, such as your eye or nose, but notice instead the shape of your face or hair and allow your drawing to grow out from there. A few ideas you might like to try out could be zooming in on one element of your face. This could work really well if you only have a small mirror to work from. Secondly, you could experiment with creating an entire continuous line drawing of your face. Thirdly, you could also use a series of marks to create highlights and another series to create shadows. Remember, all of these drawings are meant to be quite quick and spontaneous, but this doesn't mean you can't use your drawing to create a longer piece of artwork. Thank you for watching this Make and Create video. Hopefully it's given you the confidence and some inspiration to go off and create your own self-portrait. We would love to see what you've made, so please share with us online by tagging us on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter.